This is PonderMed, breaking down the big ideas in healthcare. PonderMed episode 20, here we go. Last week I sat down and had a chat with a couple of very interesting dudes. Can you just introduce yourselves first of all? So Alex.
Yeah, sure. Alex Jolly. I'm an Airbus captain in the UK. I've got about 7,000 hours on type. I've been initially a first officer and then a captain about 4 years ago. That's when I got my command. And my routes are short haul routes, so based in London and flying all around Europe, a little bit of the Middle East as well. Quite punchy, flying 3 to 4 flights a day quite often. And battling with, changes in schedule patterns, so earlies to lates is quite a common occurrence as well.
And Dave?
Hi, Dave Fielding, captain long haul. I've been 27 years in this game, I think, so definitely a different generation. So you work your way up the tree and doing the long hauls, actually. So a lot of my challenges are to do with fatigue. It's a big one. Time zone changes, where you're dealing with 8-hour plus time zone changes, and how that affects your body, affects your concentration, your decision-making skills, and your fatigue management. So lots of challenges around that one. And I have no idea how many flying hours I have.
So I'm going to quickly just explain how I met you both. And that's in the Project Wingman cafe that's been set up at the Whittington Hospital. So, I mean, for me, I hadn't heard of the project. I just stumbled across people in uniform making particularly nice Americanos, much nicer than the ones we make in the emergency department. I didn't ask that many questions, but then after the second or third time I've seen you, Alex, I think I asked you who you were and what you did, and you told me that you were a pilot. And what dawned on me fairly rapidly was, this is mental. Why is a highly trained individual making me coffee?
Good coffees.
Fantastic, superb coffee. I hope you continue making me coffee. But why are you making me coffee? Why are you not helping me train? So before we go into training and the comparison between training in aviation and healthcare, which is obviously a huge topic and got lots of different tangents that we can go down, could you perhaps explain, Dave, what Project Wingman is briefly and how you got involved?
It was actually my idea in the first place for my sins. It was the idea that we're not doing anything and we have skills. I originally thought that we could use pilots' organisational skills in hospitals. But then in conversation with Professor Rob Bohr from the Royal Free, he said, actually what we need you to do is talk. Because talking to staff in your customer service trained way is a well-being factor is hugely powerful, and that will be a big morale boost to staff. So if you're going in, use cabin crew and see if you can get uniforms. So we've got Captain Emma Henderson, who is a force of nature, and she persuaded all of the Move Mountains and got the airlines to agree, very unusually, for us to be volunteering in uniform in our own time, so that we give the professional idea of first-class service to the NHS staff. We thought we would just be nice to staff and making them a nice cup of tea or coffee, but actually it's transpired the well-being aspect of taking people out of themselves just for 5 or 10 minutes and talking about the flying, the holidays that have happened, will happen, or we hope, is proving really beneficial in terms of staff resilience and well-being. And we're looking possibly to carry that one on in the future, as this well-being aspect of it's active mindfulness of just taking yourself away from your day-to-day NHS thinking and talking about something else for 10 minutes is proving quite remarkable across the patch. So we're in nearly 45 hospitals across the country now with over 5,000 volunteers on our books, and it's proved an amazing success.
Someone like me doesn't get much access to people like you, and I just see it as a goldmine of education and information. We've, as healthcare people, particularly in acute healthcare, so emergency medicine, anaesthetics, intensive care medicine, pre-hospital emergency medicine, we've kind of held you up as the gold standard, if you like, when it comes to safety and training. I think there's been, you guys your simulation training in particular is an example to lots of safety critical industries. I'm a big fan of Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed. I'm sure both of you have read that. I'm sure many people listening to this will have read it. It's a real Bible in terms of safety practice and learning from failure. So I've kind of been a bit of a fanboy of how you do business for a while, but in terms of really drilling down into why you're so fantastic, I wouldn't be that good at explaining it. Could you talk about why you think aviation has that reputation?
We are dimly aware of this one, but the pilots, of course, have no egos at all. We don't think we're marvellous and have the answers to everything at all. Oops. We tend to lead in a lot of areas of safety.
Yeah.
I think for the simple reason that when we get it wrong, we get it spectacularly wrong, and we kill a lot of people. One example may be the Germanwings.
What Dave's referring to there is Germanwings Flight 9525, which was a passenger flight going between Barcelona and Dusseldorf back in 2015, and the co-pilot, who was suffering mental health problems, flew the plane into the side of a mountain.
Pilot mental health. Everybody has mental health. Mental health is a very popular topic at the minute. Normally it only affects one person or the small number of people around you. But Germanwings, 150 people, suddenly meant that it was a very big topic, and there we get legislation coming in that says we need to change, we need to put systems in place. And I think where aviation has really benefited is that when we have got things spectacularly wrong in terms of human factors and killed a lot of people, the regulators and the accident investigation people have come up with a series of recommendations which have said, you must change this, you must rewrite this one, you must create this process, and you must follow it through. And we have a license at the end of the day that basically says, if you don't, we're going to take your license away. And that strong enforcement has driven change.
Mm. Has it always been like that in aviation?
Personally, having only got into the game 10, 15 years ago, I think it has for me. But my understanding is that only about 30 years ago, 25 years ago, human factors and that crew resource management style really came into its own, because I think there was a high percentage of accidents that were attributed to pilot error or human factors issues that caused it. So I think it has grown and evolved over time into becoming a major part of, or safety being a huge part of the process now for us in aviation.
It started in the 1980s when there were 3 American aircraft that were fully functional in perfectly clear days, crashed. And it was put down to this nebulous concept of pilot error, which I suppose you could translate in your world as complications. And it's a big box into which anything inconvenient is thrown that no one wants to actually investigate. But that's a lot of people who were killed. And the industry took the decision to go into what is pilot error, how do you divide that one down, and then work out how it can be changed. And then that involved with it. So when I certainly first started 27 years ago, we had this, it's called CRM, Crew Resource Management, was being introduced. And I remember the letters in the back of the Union magazine saying, this is a load of rubbish, we don't need it, we've got airmanship. Why touch us? Well, because we were killing people with it. And interestingly, the people who were most vocal in saying, we don't need CRM, were the ones who actually did need it, because their human factors and leadership skills were not up to what was required, and they were the ones partially causing the problems.
I mean, you're both fully qualified, so the equivalent of consultants. Do you have an ongoing process of being examined and being measured for quality? So, for example, you mentioned simulation, Alex. Like, do you still have to simulate, even though you are a consultant? As a pilot consultant, if you like.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have to have an annual sim check, a license check, which we have to do every 12 months. But then additionally, the regulators require that every 6 months, so in between that annual license check, we carry out what's effectively a line-orientated exercise. So something like a normal day out, which starts as a normal day out and then develops into something maybe a little bit more interesting.
When you say normal day out, do you mean?
So we start, say, at Gatwick on stand, and this is speaking as a short-haul pilot, and then we might push back off stand, deal with a couple of minor technical faults. We'll be assessed how we manage those, then go into the air, and then perhaps something degrades further or the situation gets a bit worse. And again, it's how we manage that as a crew together and the outcome and the process of getting to the outcome is very much assessed. So in answer to that, Robbie, we have every 6 months we'll have a trip to the simulator, and that's a 2-day simulator session. So it's a total of 8 hours every 6 months in the sim. And then additionally to that, every couple of years we have, as I mentioned before, a line check. So we have a day out where myself and my colleague will fly to a destination and back again, and we'll have an examiner who's on the jump seat in the cockpit, and they won't say a word. They'll just watch us throughout the day, how we conduct ourselves, whether it's our actual airmanship skills or interactions with the crew and the handling agents at the outstations. So it's a whole assessment. So yeah, there's quite a lot that goes into it.
And that's for you as well, Dave.
For every
6 months in long haul too.
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, we're the most heavily checked and regulated profession out there.
Let me ask you both a question then. What's your opinion of the fact that consultants in medicine are not subject to a great deal of checking?
Potentially going to ruffle a few feathers with this line of questioning, so I thought about editing it out, but I've left it in.
Consultants in emergency medicine, I can only speak about my own specialty, but consultants in emergency medicine, once you have your badges, once you have your wings, like, that's it. That's you cooked. So the next 30 years of practice, you're relying on a bit of feedback here or there to inform your practice, and essentially there's not a great deal of checking. How do you guys respond to that? Do you think that that's crazy?
It sounds, on the face of it, quite onerous and horrific that we have this amount of checking that we have to prepare for, and we have to spend time before each of these checks in the books and refreshing and getting on top of stuff. But this this prolonged grounding has thrown a different aspect on it. I actually realise it's a comfort blanket, because if I can get through these checks, I know I'm good enough, and I don't worry about that one. And I don't speak for Alex, I'm a bit petrified at the thought of going back now after what will be months without flying. I want to be checked. I want to go back in the books, and I want somebody to say, yeah, you're good enough to go. And I'd never thought about that before.
Yeah.
But it's this idea that if it's external validation of my skills, that there's always new stuff coming on, and I'm sure it's the same for you guys as well. The manuals are always changing, procedures are always changing. I want to know that I have read it, and that I have read it and I can do the new procedures to the correct standard. And am I always the best judge of that one? I would rather somebody externally was saying, yeah, that's fine, Dave, you're good to go. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think every time I complete a sim assessment or a check, there is a wave of relief that it's over for another 6 months, and you've got your license still. But actually, it creates so much more confidence when you get back out there on the line again, and it's really nice. It's a really nice feeling to know that you are up to standard. So I completely agree. It's not so much the fact that we should be checked. It's actually a real benefit to us, because it just makes you feel more relaxed when you're at work, to be honest.
Does stuff go wrong very often? The reputation of aviation is that it's perfect in many ways. Occasionally a flight will go down, but largely you guys are so good at your job that nothing goes wrong. Is that bollocks? Actually, every flight that something happens and there's a concern.
There are complex pieces of kit, basically, and minor things will go wrong, and there's so much redundancy built into a modern aircraft system that we've got 7 flight computers on my aeroplane. So you lose one of them and it trips out, and you have to do a control alt, delete, reboot. It's not a big deal, but some things do. Things do happen. I think sometimes of great severity. Touch wood, I've never lost an engine in my aviation career, and frankly, with the modern standards of engineering, I would consider myself extremely unlucky if I ever lost an engine in my career. But that doesn't really matter. We're trained how to deal with it if it does, and I would feel confident, going on from my last comment, that no matter what was thrown at us, because the way we work on simulator training is dual, triple failures, that never happens in real life. So if you can cope with a dual or triple failure, then you can cope with usually it's a single failure in reality. And we've got the confidence, because of the training, that whatever is thrown at us, we've either got the checklists that will deal with it, or if we have to improvise, we have to think outside of the checklist box and work out what's going on. Firstly, we've got the technical knowledge of the aeroplane to understand that if a system fails, what its implications are on other systems and the operation. If you get a particular downgrade of your autopilot, for example, and you can't land in fog, okay, so if it's winter, high pressure in Europe, a lot of airports are fogged out. So if I've got a problem now, if I do lose an engine or a hydraulic system and I need to get on the ground quickly, that changes my thinking. But we practice this stuff. So I do stuff, even if stuff goes wrong, I don't have too much of a problem with it because we're trying to deal with it.
Yeah. Might sound crazy, but I actually quite enjoy the odd little technical thing happening. It really, it just makes a real difference to a day. Sometimes you can have days where it's like perfect high pressure weather system, flying in the afternoon. For some reason there are no air traffic delays, everything's running on time. You're getting on with your colleague really well, and it's just a really easy day out. But sometimes you just feel like things are up against you a little bit, and it's that challenge of problem solving. And as David said, thinking ahead and thinking about the consequences of if something else goes wrong or we have a further degradation, where do we go from there? And it creates discussion, and it's a really healthy topic of conversation with your colleague, because you start brainstorming your options and further downgrades and alternatives. So yeah, it's a really healthy environment.
Absolutely love it. So let's talk about sim. So Alex, you came and watched us do a sim in the emergency department, which I'm extremely grateful for. How did you find it?
Yeah, I was privileged to be there. Absolutely amazing experience. Didn't know what to expect, so first time I'd ever really seen anything like that.
To stop you there, you did so the simulation itself was a patient who came in via ambulance, looked very unwell, and there was a sort of basic initial assessment. Patient had high potassium and then had a cardiac arrest, and we went through advanced life support, so cardiac arrest treatment, just so that people listening know what kind of scenario it was.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was lucky enough to be given the cheat sheet, as it were, by Robbie, so I knew what was coming. But that was really helpful because I did a little bit of homework the night before and looked up the algorithm that was going to be followed, and it was amazing how many similarities there were with our failure management style when we have an issue. So just having that basic background knowledge in the sim really helped me focus on that human factors, that interactional side of things, without getting too distracted by what's happening next. Things that really struck me when I was there, it was very noisy, lots of background noise, which even for me as an observer I found incredibly distracting. A lot of people there, a lot of people coming in and out of the room as well. When the crash call goes out, it seems like you don't know when people are coming in. There's a constant potential for the situation to change, whether that's due to what you had supply-wise, so what tests you could carry out. It was fascinating to see the amount of permutations that you could generate from something like that. And then when it came to actually watching the guys doing their work, it was absolutely amazing to watch everybody as a team coming together in such a short space of time. First impressions were wow, like really unusual environment, but at the same time it really helped with me sort of understanding that human interaction, that human factors that we witnessed there.
Was there any aspect of it that was quite similar to simulation in flight?
Yeah, I think the initial response to the cardiac arrest, or the when things finally started to really pick up, the similarities for me were everybody just taking a moment to find their feet, a lot of verbalization, a lot of communication. So the communication was brilliant, and everyone was we had a lead who was communicating a bit like, say, a captain would communicate, just verbalising the situation. So it just effectively opened up the room, and so everybody had a bit of situational awareness as to what was happening. So that was a similarity, and the way that everybody knew their roles as well. When we fly, certainly when something happens suddenly, quite often there's a rule associated with it. You either generally have little time and there's a rule associated, or there is no initial rule and you have some time to deal with things. So I think everybody knew where they stood in the room, and I think when we have a failure in the flight deck, generally we know where we are in that situation.
Can I ask, because I wasn't at the sim and I'm really looking forward to
You'll be at the next one.
Brilliant. When you mentioned communication there and everybody knew what they were doing, what sort of questions were being asked? Was there a checking of understanding, and were there closed questions, open, leading, or
it's a good question, and it's something that I think we discussed, Robbie, afterwards as well. It was at an initial stage when things started to happen. It was more of a broadcast than a discussion, an open discussion at first. I think it was more of a verbalising what had happened, and so that was the initial communication at
was
the very
that effective
stage. I think with so many people in the room, it was probably the most effective way initially of getting everybody in the loop. I think if you have 8 to 10 people there and you just start asking one person initially questions, then maybe people around you might not hear what's going on because it's quite a noisy environment. So I feel like the initial discussion or the initial broadcast of what was happening certainly helped everybody sort of come to their position.
So the way that we're trained, particularly in advanced life support and advanced trauma life support, is that there should be a team leader, and that team leader stands at the foot of the bed and is kind of conducting an orchestra, if you like. And I think that there are some problems with that, and you identified those watching the sim. So the sim was very good on a technical level. So the guy who was team leading it is a senior doctor in my department, a senior trainee. He's excellent at his job. He's got excellent knowledge. He's somebody that I completely trust and I would love to do a night shift with, but don't get to because we're the same level. But he's superb. And I deliberately asked him to run the sim because I wanted to make sure that it was a reasonable standard in front of you. But I think that one of the points you made, and it's about what we were just talking about, that style of leadership where it's very much about the individual broadcasting as opposed to the individual running the show, but empowering the rest of the team by asking questions was fascinating.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely, Robbie. Yeah, so one of the things we highlighted or I pointed out was, as I said, it's great to get the ball rolling and start things off, but there were a lot of people in that room who all had a part to play, and I could see the body language. There were people who really wanted to say something, and it was a great opportunity for the lead to take a breath and ask someone a question, ask them an open question. What are the 4 T's? What are the 4 H's? Something like that. And everybody in that room knew the answer, but it just empowered somebody. It gave the lead a chance to just have a look around and see what was going on without trying to recite them themselves. And I think it's one of those really effective methods that we use when we fly. What do you think, Dave?
It's hard to talk and think at the same time.
It is, yeah.
And somebody and asking someone what they think of the situation, because there are fewer of us, normally 2 in the cockpit. If there's an emergency situation there, they say to us, time spent on diagnosis is time rarely wasted, and we do have that luxury. And it's very easy. We've done a lot of work on leading questions and confirmation bias, and to look away from someone and say it's this. It's quite hard when you're putting a lot of verbal and physical barriers up there to invite the opinion of someone else. Now it raises the question whether you want the opinion of someone else, but that's another issue. But assuming that you're being a good person with your human factors, yes, we've recognised that to err is human and we will make mistakes. So it's actually our protection to get somebody else to verify what you're doing and by asking them their view on something, they might have a different slant on it, which you might miss something, or you may have caught it, but their view from it from a slightly different perspective may increase your understanding and comprehension of the situation.
Absolutely, and I think that the point about you mentioned the 4Hs and the 4Ts, which is kind of our mnemonic for remembering what the reversible causes of cardiac arrest are. I won't try and recite them now because I can't remember them. But the point is as a team leader, you will, as you say, most of the team will know what the 4Hs and 4Ts are, and by the team leader trying to recite them, it takes up mental bandwidth, and actually it's just a golden opportunity to, as you say, empower another member of the team. Say, look, what do you think the 4Hs and 4Ts are? And certainly all the cardiac arrests that I've ever run, I've always taken the responsibility of reciting them and trying to work out, have we thought about that particular H or that particular T? And yeah, I'd never thought of it as an opportunity to get the team closer together and to, as you say, Dave, even potentially pick up information that might not have been immediately at hand. So that was the first point I really wanted to make sure that we got across on the podcast, is that fantastic point about empowering other members of the team, and to try and perhaps make it a less top-heavy style leadership.
So next up, we discuss one of the most important leadership skills when it comes to the sharp end of aviation and medicine, and that is situational awareness.
Trying to recite the 4Hs and 4Ts, trying to constantly share your mental model. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I think we need to do next. This is what we need to, the decision making that is happening right now. This is where I think the patient needs to end up. By constantly feeling this pressure to share what you're thinking, I think in many ways you might lose a bit of situational awareness.
Yes, I completely agree.
And so you made this fantastic point about the PPP, plane path people.
Yeah.
Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so as you say, 4Hs and 4Ts, I try to compare it to something aviation term-wise, and I think the 3Ps, plane path people, are an excellent way of doing it because it raises the situational awareness for everybody involved. Quite often I like to ask my colleague in the flight deck their opinion or what they think the situation is. So plane would be items such as how are we doing aircraft wise regarding systems, any degradations, have we got any other issues that we haven't met yet regarding the actual aircraft, is it safely flying? And then path being, where are we going, are we clear of terrain, are we clear of weather? And then people, you'd think maybe it's just speaking to air traffic control, but it's also how are you doing? How are you actually feeling? And I think that took me on to the point about perhaps using some form of severity scale as well as a means of knowing what the other person thinks or the other people think the severity of the situation is. So again, quite often a 1 to 10 scale of how serious do you think this is at the moment. You might find that somebody gives you a number that's completely different to yours, and they think that everything's absolutely fine while you think it's chaotic. And you might be wrong and they might be right, but if you do differ, it gives you a great opportunity for you to ask them why they think they've got that number, why they think it's less severe. So again, it's more interactive. It's that interactive style of discussion, and it gives the other person the opportunity to feel like they're very much involved in the initial situational awareness of it as well.
Do you use that same severity scale, Dave?
It's not taught. I think it's a great idea. I wish I could use it more. I don't think I'm as good as Alex in that one. We all have our different styles of how we do things. I like the idea of resolving ambiguity and how you detect an ambiguity. You put numbers on it. I like to look for body language. I like to throw open the idea of I don't try to lead. What's your interpretation of this situation? Or how would you fly this approach? And then if they or I say that I think I would like to fly it in this way, look how they react. Because if they're completely comfortable with it, you can sense it in the body language. But if there's a hesitancy, a slight furrowing of the brow, or the eyes start to wander, you can see that there's something's not quite right here. So there are other ways of picking up a difference of opinion of it. And one of our golden rules is resolve ambiguity. And when it all goes wrong in the simulator and you with your cup of coffee afterwards, there's all this pilot competencies that Alex mentioned earlier. They're quite long and in depth, but when it goes wrong, you can usually trace it to something in that matrix. And one of the big ones is there was an ambiguity there, and you didn't resolve it, and that led to it not being an optimal outcome.
Fascinating. I was thinking that the severity scale would be really useful in the context of team leading a department as well as in an individual case as well. I don't know if it's perhaps not as applicable to aviation because, as you said, it's two of you in a cockpit, but increasingly I'm having to lead a department. Overnight there's no consultant presence, and so I'm having to have my juniors there, and I'll say, right, you guys go to urgent care, you guys go to pediatrics, I'm going to stay here with X and Y, and then you have to kind of try and make sure that you're maintaining patient safety, you're not allowing a queue to get too long in one area of the department, make sure that your juniors are looked after, they're going on their breaks. There's lots of kind of different things that you need to be aware of, and it's not that easy to keep your eyes on all of the different parts of the job. And so by kind of doing a bit of a whip round and saying, how bad do you think things are tonight on a scale of 1 to 10? Is anything that's bothering you? Is anything standing out for you guys that we need to correct? So I think it's the same mantra that you guys are delivering can be applied at case level, but also in being kind of a more zoomed out managerial level.
That's a brilliant technique.
Next, we talk through this cool concept of pressure testing decision making.
Give me a good reason why we shouldn't divert.
Yeah,
well, that was a great suggestion.
Yeah, I like to use that one. I like to pressure test a decision. So we get trained quite often in the review part of our decision making process that we follow, because I think you could carry out the worst decision making model, or you could go through probably the worst decision you've ever made. But as long as you review it, then you can save it. And I think the art of reviewing decisions, even say every 10-15 minutes when you're on your way to your diversion, it's never too late to review something. So when we make a decision in the sim, for instance, and we've had a technical fault and we've realised we have to divert somewhere, we've done our bits, we've assigned tasks, and we've come up with the weather at a few destinations, the landing performance of the aircraft. We've taken everything into consideration, and sometimes it just seems so obvious where we should be going, and I think a really effective way of breaking that almost heuristic style of thinking, yeah, that's the easiest way, A to B, let's do this, is to ask somebody to come up with a really good reason why we shouldn't go there. So tell me why we shouldn't do that, and it just gets you thinking in a different style, and as I said, it pressure tests your decision making, so I find that quite effective.
Fantastic.
My favourite technique for that one, and I think it's the very best piece of followership anyone in a team could do with a leader, is to ask three simple words of any decision. Are you sure? Now, you need the culture that lies behind it, because that could be misinterpreted as you are undermining me, you're questioning my competence, etc. So provided the leader creates the correct environment that he or she invites that sort of feedback, for someone in the team, when you make a decision, to say, are you sure, makes you stop, you question the decision that you've made, so that, can I justify this? To anybody who needs to ask me afterwards, can I justify my decisions? If I can, that's great. Because if I can turn around to the person asking me that question, it did happen to me on a diversion where I burnt my bridges on an alternate. I was halfway to an alternate, was offered new information, and decided to turn around back to my main airport that I just tried to get into twice and failed. And actually it wasn't a good piece of decision making, because I thought I was offered the option and I took it without discussing it. And he was a very experienced co-pilot who, when I said, Roger, I will go back to my original destination, he said those three words, are you sure? And it was brilliant, because it made me do a mental evaluation and review of the decision, that I was happy with the decision, and it also made me verbalise why I was sure. And he went, that's great, thank you. And we were good. And it's a brilliant piece of decision. Yeah, it's a similar sort of thing. And what's lovely about this game is that Alex uses the severity scale, and I've been a captain for nearly 20 years, and he's new wonderful techniques, but we develop our own styles. There's no one way that's better than another. It's what works for you as a person, and your own little tips and tricks that do it for you.
I love that idea of "Are you sure?" I can see certain people are popping into my head though. I think God, they wouldn't respond very well to that.
Yeah.
And my question would then be: so in the cockpit, do you often have? Is it a first mate?
First officer.
First officer. Is your first officer generally someone that you've worked with before, or is it often someone completely fresh, completely new?
So the guys nodded when I asked them that question, which clearly isn't going to get picked up by audio. Schoolboy error from me.
So is that relationship ever, does that create any obstacles? Can you say, can a junior person say to a senior person they've never met before, "Are you sure?" and it's never a problem, or does it cause problems?
Oh, we've worked very hard to make sure it's never a problem. And advocacy is one of the key competencies, and it's drilled into everybody when they start in the airline. You are expected to speak up, and it will be picked up on you in the simulator if you don't speak up. It will be picked up if the captain is overbearing and doesn't allow the opportunity to speak up. But equally, if the trainer would then turn around to the co-pilot and say, actually, just because the captain was overbearing doesn't exonerate you of from your responsibility. You knew that there was something wrong, and that decision wasn't a correct one. He got the wrong decision height or the wrong setting. Why didn't you speak up about it?
Yeah, and to tie that back into the simulation that you were at, Alex, is that the team leader was fantastic and demonstrated significant competence, clearly knew what he was doing, clearly understood how this patient needed to be managed, but was the only person talking really. And that takes us back to our first point. Building a culture and a moment, a training moment where you can have everybody speaking up is not that easy, and clearly you guys have it drummed into you from the very beginning. I think we'd have a bit of it in healthcare, but it's certainly not something which is really high up the priority list. But as I said to you earlier on, it's very much, right, you're the team leader. What do you want to do next? What's your mental model? Tell the team what your mental model is. It's that kind of attitude. Cool.
The speaking, certainly as I get older, I need people to tell me what's going on, because I'm the ability to stay on top of things in the book, the sharpness of the mind, and 53, but it feels it. I want to have the reassurance that if I do drop the ball, which I know I will do for various reasons at various times of the cycle and through your wobble, as the window of circadian low is all the buzzword for us with fatigue at the minute. I need to know that my crew's got my back. So actually, it's the opposite of an ego thing, in that the older and more senior and theoretically more experienced and knowledgeable I get, the more I need people around me to pick up if I'm going to make a mistake, because I think I'm more likely to make a mistake with all of those criteria.
Totally. And I love it when a senior person asks me for my opinion. I absolutely love it. Like, if the equivalent of you, Dave, as an emergency medicine consultant, asked me, what do you reckon, Rob, should we give this drug to this patient who's critically unwell? And I gave them my 2 cents, and then I felt like they were listening. They were really listening to me. I mean, it would be the best moment of my week. I'd love it. Not to say that it doesn't happen, but it's so empowering. It's such a great leadership tool. I would say it does happen, but I don't feel that it's done deliberately enough by the people by our seniors. It feels very much like that's a deliberate, taught skill for you guys. You need to empower your trainees by asking their opinion, getting them involved in as much of the decision making as possible. That's what it sounds like to me, anyway.
It's a habit.
Yeah, it is a habit.
Yeah.
It is, and you have the best opportunity as a captain as well to start the day in that manner. So you can give your first officer the opportunity by saying to them, we've not flown together before, but I make mistakes, probably just as many as you, if not more. And if you see anything unusual, just tell me. I'm not proud. I'll correct it. We can talk about it. But open that channel of communication up right from the start of the day, and you're just looking after each other and having a great time at the same time. So you're enjoying your day out and looking after each other.
It's so ideal. I would say as well, though, is that a difference in our game is that there are lots of people. So you've got the boss and his 20 disciples, on a shift. And I think it's not as easy to be that collegiate and develop that level of camaraderie with 20 people, particularly if you need to be you need to tell a lot of them exactly what they're doing, because you've got some very junior people who essentially need to be spoon-fed. Not quite as easy, but huge lessons to be learned, no doubt about it.
Long-haul aeroplanes are big. They have a number of cabin crew. And cabin crew can be quite young sometimes, younger than my daughter, which is always a
wake-up call.
But one technique I use in the briefing is seatbelts and turbulence.
Right.
That we're stuck at the front of it. We don't often know how severe the turbulence is on a big aeroplane. And usually the junior people, the youngest, are working down at the back, because that's where they do. And at the briefing, I'll normally say, who's working down the back? And they'll sort of come to attention and stick a ginger hand up. And I'll say, you're the most important person on the aeroplane when it comes to knowing whether the seatbelt should be on or off. So if you think that they're on when they should be off, or vice versa, just give us a shout, because we won't know at the front. So that would be great if you could do that one. And that's empowering, but that's taking the junior person and actually saying, you're the most important person when it comes to this specific item of the flight. That's your responsibility. And they're 19 and they really grow into that one and think, I've got a job to do and I've been recognised for that job. And that brings the whole team together, because it's all about flattening authority gradients.
I think that links with a point that you made as well, Alex, about the sim with regards to monitoring chest compressions. Obviously there's a lot of different jobs that need to be done in a cardiac arrest, but that's a really important one. And it's one that you could definitely delegate to someone quite junior, and it's something which they really need to be focused, and they need to do a good job. I think that is not, again, an empowerment opportunity, but also, it's crucial for the quality of the care being delivered.
Absolutely, yeah. Just that maintaining standards, or high standards. So you could, if you've got somebody who is stood there and available, why not use them? And what a great role for somebody to have, to just be that third eye and keep an eye on processes and basic procedures. So the basic stuff's done right, have someone monitoring. And for us, when we fly, once we get below a certain height, we really have to monitor each other very carefully, and because we're just closer to the ground, and so that monitoring process, if we had someone extra available, as we do on certain flights on short haul like Innsbruck's, you're in real terrain critical areas with the potential for wind shear, having a third person there, that is their job. They are there to spot the insidious things that maybe the other two are so focused on other items. And so you could bring that into that medical role where you have somebody there who can monitor basic parameters and basic procedures and just highlight them.
All right, so I'll stop it there. I've still got some more of my conversation with Dave and Alex to play you, and I'll try and get it out for you next week. It includes a tasty little bit about checklists, which is one of my favourite subject areas. But for now, see you later.